Back with the DP Show. I am D. Palmer. We're talking about the Hunger Games. I'm challenging one and all. If they haven't seen it, or even if they have seen it, go out there, get a copy, and watch it to try to investigate for any sort of libertarian messages. I've provided a couple, especially the way that the niceness of all government officials and buildings and vehicles and so forth are juxtaposed with the District 12 state of dilapidation and filth, both in the city and the people who live there, or also how the tributes are essentially a form of taxation, and just like our form of income taxation, where you don't have any choice whether or not once a year you're going to go out there and pay your taxes. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. So are these kids sent off whether anybody in the district likes it or not? And there was even the suggestion that maybe they should just keep watching. What would have happened if they just quit watching all the different Hunger Games? What if we quit paying our taxes? What would happen in that case? I think it's a very interesting conversation that one could have in our day or in that Hunger Games day. And also the last one, the appearance of everybody in the Capitol, how they all really resemble Katy Perry, and the whole dehumanized thing with the wigs and the funny glitter and all that stuff that's going all over most music artists that are really making it big anymore. And how interesting I find it that Suzanne Collins, who's worked in television, worked in the same medium as the music videos that are portraying this dehumanized artist with the funny hair and the glitter and the whatnot, that she would then portray in her dystopia that that is the only way you can really gain acceptance, if you live with the people in the city that are calling all the shots and look in such a way that is definitely dehumanizing, as is being portrayed in music videos right now. Continuing with the whole theme behind the appearances, the general opulence of the Capitol, how we see it when Katniss and her, to a degree, partner Peeta Mellark are driving in and checking out exactly how wonderful the Capitol is, again, especially related to the place that they were coming from in District 12. You're going over a dam that's providing with all sorts of hydroelectric power in a city that lacks nothing and provides every sort of comfort, both off of the different technologies that the city has, but also the sweat and labor and backs of all the people in the different districts. You have all of these things contributing to what is truly a magnificent city. And I'll tell you one thing, at this point, when you're watching the film, if you haven't seen the film and you have enjoyed the books, it is at this point you understand how painstaking the effort was to try to make the spirit and the message and the theme behind the novels become as readily available and apparent with the different films. I'm saying films because I can't imagine that they're going to be doing anything differently with the future films. This is when I realized that they had worked hard to capture the same spirit that I had perceived while reading the trilogy. And just as so often we get the idea, and I've referenced it before, and I just cringe every time I think of the different people writing about Sarah Palin in the 2008 election. Every time she would say something silly, she would be ridiculed, and we'd be reminded that we are in serious times, and these serious times require serious people who can pursue them, and that she is not serious, so then she should not be considered for these lofty positions because she's going to go into government work one heartbeat away from the presidency. And can we really rely on somebody who comes from such a humble background and says potentially silly things sometimes? Just like that whole concept that we can only send the absolute best and brightest to represent us in Washington because those guys have been doing such a great job, right? Especially the last 40 or 50 years. Same thing with the appearance of the Capitol. Everything else is run down. Everything else is dirty. Everything else is getting uglier by the second, except for this Capitol, which is clearly the source of all things wonderful and enlightening, and yes, even protecting. Now, when you consider, as the movie rolls on, that these guys are forcing all the people in these different districts to do something horrible, like send children to their deaths for the entertainment of a select few, you can consider how likewise evil this whole representation is. The only nice thing in this make-believe country also forces people into essential slavery while forcing them to send off their kids to die for sport. All right? Just let that sink together, where you have these people who are enjoying things while everybody else is living in misery. Oh yeah, and they're also killing for sport. How evil the whole concept is. for a group of people to enjoy wealth at this level while forcing everybody else into poverty. I say that again because more and more reports are coming out, especially in the alternative media, about how impoverished Americans are becoming in general. Now, Washington, D.C. isn't making anybody die for sport yet, but you could probably talk to a few anti-war activists who would probably find a lot of things to disagree with as far as everything that I had just said. Two anti-war types that are portrayed in the Hunger Games, and please forgive me for that Ryan Seacrest-like segue, but Peeta Mellark and Katniss Everdeen, I believe, have a lot of very strong anti-state inclinations. For example, Katniss makes her living outside of the state's trivial laws. Right? She is a hunter. She sneaks through the electric fence and spends most of her free time in the wilderness trying to find food that she can use to feed her family and that she can trade for, knickknacks or anything that might make life a little bit more bearable. All of this is outlawed, and you might wonder, why would anybody want to outlaw something as simple as hunting? Or something like this where you have a limited amount of food and you have people starving and so on and so forth. Why wouldn't they want somebody to go out there and take some of the burden off of the state? Well, I think the answer for that is obvious, that the state doesn't want any competition, that the state wants everybody looking to it for any sort of sense of comfort or even livelihood. And here is somebody who is making her living, finding that livelihood, outside of the arbitrary rules that the state has established about how one can and cannot do that. They essentially don't want to have self-sufficient serfs in the Hunger Games. They want all the different districts to be relying completely on them being the state. But she is willing, for a couple of reasons. One, her father's dead, so she doesn't have much of a choice, but also because she enjoys it, because it does wonderful things to try to provide a better living for her and her family. She's going to go outside the arbitrary rules that the state has established. Much like the speed limit, right? I can drive safely at 55, 65, 75, 85 miles an hour. I don't need the state telling me how to be safe. She doesn't need the state telling her how she can provide for her family. This is something that you're going to see a little bit more in detail as the next movies come out, or if you read the books. One in particular, in the second installment, she and Peeta have to go on a tour, and they wind up back at the Capitol and have this big feast, and they eat themselves stuffed. They eat themselves stupid. And everybody starts asking them, how come you're not eating anymore? Well, we're stuffed and we're stupid. Well, here, take this. It makes you throw up. And they're appalled because, why are you making yourselves throw up so you can go eat more when there are so many other people out there starving? Just to give you an idea about how she refuses to embrace the whole concept of everything that is being represented by the Capitol. Just as when she is at home and not having found success in the Hunger Games, she is not going to bow to their arbitrary rules and stop hunting. Same thing, she's not going to bow to their arbitrary customs and inducing vomit so you can go out and have a better party. You see the same rebellious spirit in Peeta Mellark. He is really embodied his spirit, I thought, as they did in the book. And just as I had just referenced how you could really see that with the way that he responds, or the way that the train pulls into the Capitol, how I could understand that they are really trying to be true to the message that the book was providing. His character, above all else, really demonstrated the effort that the writers and the director were trying to keep the spirit of the novels with the feature film. And they had him say at one point before they went into the ring, or the circus, if I'm going to die, I don't want them to think they own me. And I don't think there's anything more libertarian that anybody could utter. Right? Libertarians want to distance themselves from the state. They think the state is too involved in just about every private or individual endeavor. And the last thing they want anybody in the state thinking is that they have any sort of ownership. Yes, you can extract my wealth by taxes or anything along those lines, but I don't want you thinking that you're doing that because you own me. It's more of an allowance at this point. Peeta Mellark really embodied that whole thing, both in the book and in the film. Moving on, though, they're going to go into the Hunger Games. They're going to have to fight to the death, and some of them are going to have much more success than others. And there's one character in both the film and the book that very easily pulls on the heart's strings. Her name is Rue. She's African American. From listening to her homeland or home district, it is very evident that she is from the agricultural South. First, an interesting way of casting that. Somebody who is of an African American descent portraying the same region of the country who, of course, violently enslaved people for more than 100 years, is now being portrayed as, again, a slave in the same region, the agricultural South. But interestingly, once she is killed, her district erupts in violent rebellion. Just like the South is the only, we'll say, district of the United States of America who has ever tried to stand up to the state and fought the American Civil War as a result of that, here the first sniff of any sort of violent rebellion against the capital or the state in the Hunger Games is coming from the same region. Might just be a coincidence. Maybe Suzanne Collins is telling us that she understands something about the South even today that we do not. But the biggest thing to take out of it was the message is that you cannot, from a libertarian perspective, espouse any sort of violence against the state for two big reasons. The first one is immoral. It's wrong. Okay? Any sort of violence is wrong. You shouldn't be meeting violence with violence, especially when, number two, something like a modern state is so much better at it than you are. If you need any evidence of that, just go to the Google image button and search SWAT team and tell me what are you going to do against something that's dressed like that. Okay? The whole message out of that exchange, that sequence, Rue's death, and the different, or I shouldn't say the different, but the revolution that is inspired in her district, the whole thing that you should understand from that is don't do it, right? If you are that passionate against something like a modern state, you need to find some sort of intellectual way to try to persuade them to find different means of control. If only because they're so much better at violence than are you. But also it's immoral. It's immoral and it's wrong to be violent. But finally, the overarching message from both the books, the trilogy, and the first installment of the feature film portraying those books, I should say, is that everything that we have and everything that we are and everything that we can have are gifts that can be delivered to the state whenever it asks, right? We have children. And at one point in the film, Katniss says she's never going to have kids because she doesn't want to throw them into the Hunger Games. Pretty tender moment there. But even our kids, is being suggested, is something that can be thrown off whenever the state comes and beckons and calls, right? And if you need any further evidence of this, and it's something else that I teased on Wednesday, the Republican convention, all right, has been the whole Republican nominations season. I don't know what else to call it because it is nothing short of entertainment. It's been a complete farce where the design has been to get one of a chosen few in to try and take away the presidency from Obama, even though they are yet to suggest anything that is that different than any of Obama's principles or policies. And there is one in particular. Now, the DP show does not endorse candidates, but there is one candidate in particular in Ron Paul that seemed like he was going to at least provide an avenue of discussion that might lead to different policies than those of the establishment, meaning Romney, since he got the nomination, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, they've all been essentially the same guy. Go back and just trace all the different ways that we've wound up with this alleged Marxism that Obama is supposedly trying to install. And then we go to the convention, and Ron Paul does enough to win maybe as many as 190 delegates that could go represent him at the convention. And the Republicans, even after they have done so much at the different conventional levels at the states to try and make this guy as of little significance as possible, then change the rules so he cannot have any sort of movement to challenge Romney for the nomination. Romney was going to be nominated, but the whole thing was what we say goes. You can come and participate just as long as you do exactly what you're told. You give your gifts when we want them, okay? You're not really allowed to participate any further. You need any evidence of the Hunger Games coming up right now? Here it is, the Republican convention in this whole presidential campaign season. Diamondbacks are next. Thanks for listening. This has been the DP Show. Good night.